of the country and those overseas to the third segment of Viraam, which we refer to as Than, where symbolic gender-based violence finds concrete expression in gender-unresponsive spaces that affect well-being. We in Viraam are a collective committed to the cause of gendered non-violence, essentially. And in Viraam, we shift our gaze from manifest to the latent, the obvious to the imperceptible, and hence everyday forms of gender-based violence that form a part of our everyday living, thinking, and interactions. So Viraam literally means a pause, and in a way we are suggesting to our viewers that maybe it's a good time to take that pause to reflect and recognize what we often let go as normal. And it is this very normal that we as a collective are interested in. So Viraam is interested in, let's say, why a Ruhi suddenly stopped attending school. Suddenly, of course, to an outsider, but not so sudden and definitely not without a reason for our Ruhi. We further are interested in why Rani doesn't feel comfortable playing football with her male counterparts, why Nidhi finds a particular space to be threatening and perceives it to be unsafe, why Rahul may call his girlfriend at a particular time every single day as she walks along the pavement on her return back home. So we might want to go back and take a good look at our very everyday quotidian spaces such as the gym, the dormitory, the public toilet, the school, or for that matter, our very own home. Gender-sensitive design acknowledges that our environments are far from gender-neutral and aims to combat spatial inequities by drawing out the various patterns of discrimination, often disguised in gender-neutral points of view. Gender neutrality, we assert, is problematic as it can result in various forms of generic design and decision-making, and a refusal to see and acknowledge how different genders occupy space differently and with different needs. There is still more work needed in understanding how the gendering of architecture shapes the bodies, identities, and agencies of people that pass through it. We in Viraam thus look at the mundane and the everyday, recognizing its potential for violence, which oftentimes is not realized given how deeply entrenched it is. Forming, therefore, a language, a lexicon of protest in our mental landscapes is one of the foremost intents of our collective. And we are very happy to have with us Dr. Preeti Vajpayee and Kabir Vajpayee. So wonderful to have you amidst us. And we're really looking forward to today's conversation. We have all our members from Viraam. They come from diverse backgrounds, but mostly students from a humanities background. And at the same time, we have people who are listening in as well. And this conversation shall be recorded. So very pleased to have you. I'll give it over to you now. Katyayani, in case you want to mention something, do go ahead. And thereafter, we'll have Mr. Kabir Vajpayee and Dr. Preeti Vajpayee.
Looking forward to the conversation. Good evening, everyone. Thrilled to have you here. And ma'am and sir, when I was thinking about this conversation, I just realized that, my first exposure to architecture as a human being probably has been reading The Fountainhead and, idolizing rock and actually thinking about how I don't want to be Keating all my life. And when I listen to your talk, I realized that's how the embodiment of thinking like rock is, thinking about how a building can be a learning aid or how a building can actually have a gender or invite a gender or make a gender feel unwelcome or irrelevant. I think, that's truly the embodiment of something we are seeking to achieve. So I think I'll not waste time by speaking myself. So I'll give it over to you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Just a very brief introduction, though it's honestly not required, but just for the sake of formality, I guess. So Dr. Preeti and Kabir Vajpayee are architects based in New Delhi with extensive experience on developing learning environments of schools and preschools in rural as well as urban areas. Dr. Preeti Vajpayee is an urban planner and academician, and the duo, and in fact a couple to admire, every young girl's, I guess, dream. They have founded Vinyas in 1996 to undertake innovative, application-oriented interdisciplinary research and design, build capacity, and provide policy support. They've been listed as amongst the 32 great stories of change inventive Indians in 2009. Mr. Kabir Vajpayee was recognized as social entrepreneur and was elected as Ashoka Fellow for Lifetime in the year 2012 by Ashoka Innovators for the Public. Professionally, their central concern has been to address diversity, inclusion, equity, gender responsiveness through architectural designs. Today, they will be sharing examples of their studies from the perspective of gender responsiveness towards women and girls in two settings and what can be done about it. So, an urban setting, here we'll be talking about the Delhi metro station, and a rural setting, which is urinal and toilet facilities in schools. And this will, of course, be accompanied with illustrations. So, handing it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I'm really looking forward to this discussion today. So we will just start our presentation. Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Okay. So it's a very interesting, topic that you have, allowed us to speak on. With such an enlightened audience, I don't think that I need to go into any definitions, but very, very briefly, a gender-neutral design assumes that needs of different users are identical, and therefore whatever is made, the impact would be identical too. But such a approach can be gender blind, and it can really cause a lot of hindrance to both the genders, in different ways. Though again, gender is not a binary, so I'm not going into all that detail. But gender responsive design, on the other hand, really addresses this issue that needs of the different genders are unique, and therefore a focus on equity is really required. We cannot be seeing gender responsive design from the prism of equality only. And due to gender division of work, women experience very different constraints than men. So in this particular presentation, I would be focusing on women and girls, and essentially the female gender. So we shall be sharing two case studies. One is in the urban context of Kashmiri Gate metro station in Delhi, and the stakeholders are disaggregated on the basis of age also. So we would be looking at young mothers, students, housewives, elderly, all age groups basically. And the second case study is of toilet design for schools in Rajasthan in rural. This is a work under process with support of UNICEF. And the stakeholders here are preschoolers, because these schools also have co-located Anganwadis or early childhood education centers, and elementary school girls, adolescent girls who have started having periods, and how school toilets, if it is not, responsive to these unique needs, how it can create a lot of problems for students. And then women also, women teachers and Anganwadi workers and other stakeholders. So Kashmiri, I will first begin with Kashmiri Gate metro station, and Kabir shall be doing the presentation on these toilet designs. So Kashmiri Gate metro station is amongst the oldest metro station of Delhi, and it is one of the busiest also. It has almost a daily footfall of 2.5 lakh people are using it daily. So you can imagine the kind of footfall, 2.5 lakhs, 0.25 million basically. And it is quite near to a railway station and interstate bus terminal, also nearest to Old Delhi railway station and ISBT Delhi. That means that there are many first-time users, many females who would be coming to this station for the first time. They are the first-time users. And also it has three lines which are converging. One is yellow line, violet line, and red line. So in lines going in three different directions, they converge over here. So first I will begin with the very unique travel context of urban women, and these contexts are both societal and biological. 65% more women are likely to travel with small children or infants or elderly as compared to men, 65% women. In Delhi, only 35% women have driving license, so women are more likely to travel by public transport, and this is again a very gendered issue that vehicle ownership for women is much less. 20 Delhi post pandemic it has become 15, but only around 20% female workforce participation rate, 80% for men. So many women are not in active workforce, and the reasons are many, but lack of facilitative ecosystem, which will include travel amongst other things, is very important. And women are also spending 3 times more time than men on unpaid care work, because usually these are very gendered roles and responsibilities, all parenting, house management, nursing the child, purchasing, everything is comes on women. Delhi is the crime capital of India, number one, and another issue which may seem a bit out of context with this statistics, but very important, that even the footwear is very gendered, and a lot of females end up wearing high heels because of societal concepts of aesthetics and things like that. And in a study done in there are no such study in India, so I am quoting from a study done in USA from 2002 to 2012, and almost 1.23 lakh cases of injury caused due to high heels, and in that 98% were females. So that is another reality. And then the wayfinding by women in metro stations is more difficult. We have done extensive surveys. We have found that they face, elderly women especially face more travel hesitancy, also because elder literacy rate is very low for women in India, 30.2 only. For men, it is 56.3. So reading the graphics, the maps and things like that is difficult, and there are many times cases of elderly women boarding wrong trains and things like that. So these were the societal issues. Some of them, though, it is more complex than that, but I'm trying to touch upon certain very relevant ones. And biological factors are that there are very inadequate sanitation facilities all across India, whether it is at household level or in public spaces, and therefore the urinary tract infection rate is very high in India, almost 20%, but this is a national average. In urban areas it is higher. There are studies which are showing almost 40%, but again an under-researched area. So and then UTI is also a major cause of infertility and other reproductive organs and kidney failures and things like that. 50% women and 59% children in India are anemic, and we are the anemia capital of the world, which is highest in world, and this causes a lot of fatigue and tiredness. Now these are the realities that are there. 84% women experience cramps, pains and discomfort while having periods. And anemia will perpetuate blood loss. Now, so gender is one of the key socio-demographic variable that can have an impact on travel needs, but it is often not understood at all. And the study findings that we are showing is based on the survey of 332 respondents of all age groups. So what are the design implications, of all the statistics that we saw? The design implications, I'm taking up these 5 today. There are more, but we have a limited, time. So I'm just taking these 5. So platform designs, how we are designing the platforms, how we are doing the vertical circulation, how walkable our stations are, how are we addressing the needs of safety and wayfinding. So in platform designs, the first and foremost is that, whether the toilets have been provided or not, because like I told you that many women are likely to travel with infants and children. And when we were talking to respondents, there have been many cases that a woman may, hold urine, but for a child, if the child wants to go, she has to abort her travel. There is no toilet on the platform. Then she has to go to concourse, no toilet there. In many cases, it is outside the metro station. So she walks down till there, take the child to the washroom, then comes back, again has to pay for the ticket, again walk down to the platform, and then board the train again. So a disruption of 20 to 30 minutes, easily, and besides the discomfort that is there. Then location of toilets is also extremely important, because many toilets are in many a times in many isolated places, and there is no passive surveillance that is happening. So even if toilet is provided but not located safely, it won't be used, or even if it is used, there can be cases of all kind of things happening. And many times women will only use when they are in part of a larger group. Public seating becomes extremely important, because there are pregnant women who are having periods and a lot of discomfort, women who are traveling with small children and infants, and also carrying luggage, because like I told you, it is near ISBT and railway station. And many a times women are traveling alone with children, carrying a lot of luggage, and there is no seating. I will show you the detailed plans. So seating is also a very important aspect. Child-friendly toilets, again, a huge need, because if a woman goes to the toilet with a small child and she wants to visit the loo, so where does she leave the child? That is a problem that many women face. There are no attendants, no seat for the child, and so many such detailing, small little details are missing, which create a lot of stress for women. Child care points are missing, where to change the nappy, where to feed the child, things like that. One may argue that that in a metro station waiting time is less, but even with 10 minutes waiting time or 12 minutes waiting time, even then all these situations can arise easily. And then vertical circulation, we found that lifts is the most preferred form of vertical circulation for many women. Many women, like women who are again traveling with young children, or elderly women, or women again who are pregnant or having pain, so not everyday travel, but for few days or for a few months, they might definitely prefer using lifts. And but like I will show in the analysis, that is not really provided. Visibility of lifts is another very important aspect, not just the provision, but the visibility, how visibly it is located. Otherwise, it becomes a place where a lot of crime takes place. Walkability is another very important issue because women traveling with small children or pregnant, or if you're making them travel a long distances, this also needs to be taken care of. And with optimal, one can always optimize it if we have that concern in our design brief, then we would be able to optimize it, I'm sure, just by little measures. Does not require rocket science. Just by little repositioning of entrances and everything, one can easily do it. What kind of surface finishes are we giving? The older, so yellow line platforms and red line platforms were constructed earlier at Kashmiri Gate, but violet line, the third line, has been recently constructed, and a very smooth, glossy kind of a surface finish is there, and in which accidents are frequently happening. Women are slipping and things like that. Public seating again, because the whole station, not just a platform, at multiple places we need to provide seating. Gradients, in many places gradients are very very acute, and my colleague also, she's of short height and she always wears high heels, and in 2016 she slipped and broke both her ankles, and rods had to be inserted. 4 months of extraordinary leave, a lot of discomfort, surgeries and everything. And the vendor who was helping us that day with, when she fell down and we had gone there, the vendor was telling us that this is a very common occurrence, especially with women stakeholders. The edge details also are very, very important, because many students who are wearing high heels, that they say that especially pointed heels, they get stuck in the edges especially. So edge details of staircases, of escalators, of various places, these also need to be done very carefully. Safety issues, land use near exits and entrances, it becomes extremely important, because these respondents during survey, there have been many anecdotal accounts. One, there is not this particular metro station, but there is another metro station, and the exit opens into a very lonely stretch, and therefore many women do not get down there, though it is nearer to their home. They could go to the next station and then they come back. So when so they are spending more time, the travel cost is going up, the time poverty is going up. And like I already discussed, that many things they come on women. So she always facing time poverty. Most of the household chores are assigned to her. She's always facing time poverty. So even these safety issues can play in a very, in ways which can really make a lot of impact on her. And this travel cost and travel time also. Illumination, another problem, orientation of exits, how they're oriented, visibility, location of services, whether it is a food vendor or different kind of services, how they're located, can create eyes on street or not create. And then hygiene and cleanliness. Wayfinding, again, how graphics are done, are they just textual, or they're visual also, and audio also, things like that. Map locations, map detailing. I think I'm already exceeding time, so I will just give a very brief overview of what is actually happening at Kashmiri Gate Station. So I'm just talking about these 4 issues. How different platforms are connected, what are the platform provisioning, whether lifts are there, toilets are there, things like that. How is the visual connectivity happening? We have done analysis using softwares, and walkability issues. So I'm not covering the whole cabinet, because again time is less. This is Kashmiri Gate Metro Station. So this is the entry level, and all the gates are along this. This is the ground level. And for yellow line, we go down. There is a concourse, then we further go down to the platform. For violet line also concourse, then platform, and for red line we go up. So violet and yellow are underground and red is above. This now red line platform is the highest platform in Delhi, and the vertical travel is almost 14.5 meters, which is around 4 stories, easily 4+ stories, and there is no lift provision here. And the lifts that you can see here, this is the light blue is the color which is showing the lift provision. So there is the lift that is shown, but this is meant only for administrative staff. So for general public, there is no lift provision. In yellow platform, there is only one lift, but when you will see the plans, you will see that it is hardly visible. And for violet, again one lift, but not from the ground level. So it's very poorly connected, and like I told you that almost 2.5 lakh, or 0.25 million people using this station every day, and lift provision is very poor. And when we talk to the women, almost 55% women wanted more lifts. And these are the kind of anecdotal accounts that I am not again going into it, but this is a very common problem. Many people have related these kind of issues, that young mothers struggling with luggage and with children, and everything up a staircase or an escalator. These are the provisioning on the platforms. I will just quickly cover. These are the pink, the seatings, and this thing that you are seeing here, the pink rectangle, is the pink coach, which is the women's coach. And as you can see that the seats are very, very far off, and no women or girl would go and sit there, because everyone wants to board the train as soon as possible so that they can find a seating inside the coach. And on the other side also, towards the other side also, very few seats. Escalators are not visible from, in this yellow line, from one of the gates which is nearer the ISBT, and people have to, with luggage, use staircase. And there are no toilets on any of the platforms, only on the concourse, but they are also not visible. On violet line, there are absolutely no seats, only one lift, not visible from one side, slightly visible, better visibility from the other side, and no toilets again. The flooring is very slippery. And 83.3% of respondents stated that the number of seats on the platform need to be increased. This is true for all the platforms, not just violet. And similarly for red line, there are seats, but again very far off placed, and therefore no, women in reality uses it. No toilets again. Escalator, like I told you, is very high. Lift is there, but not for public use. So the provisioning, these are not very expensive or very exotic things to do. Very easily they could have done it. This visual connectivity we have done using a software, and it is just showing. So this is how we read it. The colors towards orange and yellow, they show better visibility on the scale, and towards blue show poor visibility. So this is the ground level entrance, and these are the toilet locations, and it is in blue, hardly visible. Some of our students came to know that there are toilets only when this study was going on. And there have been anecdotes like this, that students wanting to use the toilet urgently because they're having periods, and they didn't know about this, so they went to the next station, which is Vidhan Sabha, used the toilet, then came back. And the process, these are university students, and they almost missed one whole class. These are the concourse level for yellow and violet lines, and same thing, this is the toilet block, and again in blue, very poorly visible, and therefore though it is there at concourse level, but hardly any footfall. So And these are some of the anecdotal accounts regarding, footwear and wayfinding and things like that. I'm not really going in detail, but I'm just reading out this one, that one day one of the respondent is telling about an incident that she saw a mother and a daughter rushing to board the train, which was already there on the platform. The mother boarded, but the child slipped and fell. The train door closed and moved on. The train moved on. The mother and child both were frantic. So there are students who are carrying shoes, who wear shoes, while traveling, and come to the university and change into sandals. So, this impact on women, when we are not making it gender responsive, is very, very disproportionate because of the gendered roles also, and it is increasing the travel cost and time poverty and travel cost. Like I said, workforce participation rate is so poor. Most of the women are in informal sector. The per capita income of women is much less, so we are increasing the travel cost. It may also mean that she becomes a career dropout. Our career dropout rates are very high in India again, and missed employment and education opportunities. In Delhi alone, 76% girls are dropping out from higher education, only 24% GER, 50% women are career dropouts in India, less than 1/3 women in formal sector, mostly informal sector. Then stress and discomfort and poor quality of travel experience really causes a lot of stress, causes a lot of absenteeism from work, school, and college. The crime rate can be very high because of these, these unresponsive or gender blind design things that have been done. So just a little bit of gender responsiveness can lead to more equity in urban travel for women. So that's all from my side, and these are just, I think, really go into this. You can go to the next presentation.
Just an off-the-cuff remark, ma'am. So a lot of these gender unresponsive designs that you talk about, these are essentially biases which are getting embedded in our spaces. But what's interesting is maybe those who are a part of the architecture of it, in the design part, the engineers, they're not necessarily doing it in an intentional manner. It's not really intentional. It's just that these are things which are being overlooked. And maybe that's where the biggest problem lies as well. The fact that we're not necessarily reflexive about such issues. So maybe it's not something which is being done purely by design or by intention, but the fact that it is being done in such an unthinking manner. I think that's something which I took from your talk. I don't know if others would resonate with this. Maybe it's not a conscious design of somebody to, let's say, overlook these things. It's just issues that people do not talk about, that do not come up in their minds. So it is this, I think, the very aspect of thinking when it comes to design. Sometimes thoughts get imprinted on the way we create spaces. So I find that interesting. Also, another aspect that I find interesting in your talk is, of course, nobody thinks about the ramifications of how certain specific, design aspects that are overlooked may have medical, health-related ramifications, social, structural ramifications, which alludes to the idea of, again, structural violence. So nobody is essentially connecting, let's say, an aspect like UTI, urinary tract infection, to, let's say, inadequate sanitation facilities. So I find this aspect of unintended consequences, these second-order effects, also very interesting that you mentioned.
Yeah, and you're very right, Priyadarshini. And when I was showing, these findings to a group of male architects, I'm not, passing any adverse comment, but one of the person said that, so do you think that we should be designing our flooring for high heels? So it's not a question of that, if we are designing for the vulnerable group, and if we are designing keeping our reality in mind, I think we will eventually become more inclusive, because there are disabled, there are all category of people, elderly, who might find this flooring very difficult to negotiate, very slippery kind of flooring. So you're very right that there are many ramifications which are not exactly apparent or tangible, and but they're very intangible but very important. And we are seeing the other part of it. Women workforce participation rate so low, career dropouts so high. I mean, it is really a tragedy in 21st century if you are facing these issues.
Absolutely, ma'am. If I may add something here, this talk about the flooring. So I've been I've been traveling in the Delhi metro earlier when I was a young girl traveling. Now, of course, we are posted here and there. So I do remember doing all of what you mentioned. Carrying a pair of sneakers, wearing the sneakers on the metro, changing into my footwear as soon as I reached office, and something I just feel we come back to the concept called the gender data gap, because there's so less data on how every space or any action is, how genders are responding to that action. As we talk about slippery spaces being difficult for women in heels, it's also something which brings me back to an incident in my college. Our college had cobblestone flooring, and that's absolutely uncomfortable for women. And if we talk about even one part is of course the heels. The other part is that women's shoes have a thinner sole than men's shoes. They're designed in a manner because we do not generally have very thick soles in our shoes, and that's where our response to any sort of a flooring is absolutely different. And probably when we take cognizance of it, speak up about it, probably that's how it's incorporated. So absolutely understand that is unintentional. I just hope it's so heartening to see the way so much of thought has gone into understanding how to in the various design platforms. So I just hope we're able to replicate it at many other places.
Thanks. So one more thing that I find very gendered is that, though I read it somewhere in a book called Invisible Women, which I really liked, but that women always have to tend to carry a purse because they do not have pockets in their dress. So it's again pockets only in men, trousers or whatever. So though now we have started happening, but we are giving pockets in female this thing also. But that means again purse, and for a young mother, struggling with so many things, a bag for the child, the purse, the child, it's quite a sight to see.
Yeah, I would also like to add one more aspect to what we were discussing just now, if I can, Priyadarshini.
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, which is that I think what you said, that it is not intentional, but it is something which is kind of embedded in the mindset. And I think this is what has happened in the discipline of design, whether you look at product design or whether you look at architectural design, where many of these things are developed and designed for able-bodied men. Maybe not really by the design, but more because of the mindset which has been there. And I think in a transitory phase when we are trying to make that change, we will have to go through and navigate through a lot of things over a period of time. And certainly architectural education level part at the ground level. So, with your permission, should we move forward, or would you like
Yes, sir,
that we
please.
discuss?
Waiting to hear.
We'll have respondents taking it forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do we have any questions for Dr. Preeti Vajpayee? Do we have any questions for ma'am, or would any of our members like to say something?
I would like to actually say something like the portion where we called about, the slippery flooring, or Katyani ma'am talked about how we have, thin shoes. So recently an incident happened for me. So I was at sports, and we have, the tracks for running. So specifically the field tracks for women are, built in such a manner that we get less leg space where we have to run, or less accommodative space. Now the fact behind that, I think it's very structural that Indian women, they mostly, tend to be within the height of 5 to 5'5". What about the ones who are 6 or 6'2"? It's not really convenient for us to fit in that space, or to even run in that space, and to even use shoes which are kind of having might be a much thinner sole for that matter. So I hurted my leg then, and I broke my ankle. And when I was down with it, I visited the medical space, and something out there kind of bummed me out, that this medical spaces are itself so exclusionary in nature. When we talk about how insensitive and how rather unconscious the designers are, or the top policymakers are, I think there's a tendency of them to make the visible into the invisible, right? We don't have things for accessibility, like Sir said, that it's typically made for able-bodied men. So women do not have a place there, disabled people do not have a place there. And whenever we try to access these spaces, they don't have a lift mostly. Like if you go for an X-ray center, or if you go to just for maybe a blood test or something, the casual explanation they come up with is that this is not a hospital, this is just a basic place of testing. But what about the ones who are generally going out there, who are doing their daily routines and checkups? Maybe we are on a periods, maybe we have hurted our ankle, maybe someone is immobile, and a person is lifting that person up and transporting that person without the consent of that person. It might be kind of uncomfortable for us. It might be violating our own private space, where again the idea of our own personal space comes into being. So I guess, of course, there's a unbiasedness that goes behind, but also somewhere I feel there's a particular conscious effort that's being made by the policymakers, the governments, everybody, especially the men out there who are at the top positions, to make it the more exclusionary in nature. Else, even if the transitionary thought is going into the process, and we are discussing it here, but literally how many of us are going to take away, and how many of ones who are in the governance are going to take it up and work upon it? That's a bigger question. So it literally needs to be done, and it's so nice to just hear about all the experiences and embodiment of all real life experiences out here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mona. Sir, we can have your presentation now. We're all waiting to hear about your work.
Yeah. So let me share. Can you see this screen now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is an ongoing work which is now nearing completion, at least on the infrastructure augmentation front. And this is, and you'll see some bilingual slides, because this is actually to be communicated in Hindi. But so now, the fundamental thing, so I'm going to the other extreme now, which is not an urban situation. In fact, not a situation like Delhi Metro, but you will find some commonality in the issues as we go into the rural part of Rajasthan in this particular case. So this is a partnership work that we are doing with UNICEF for looking at the sanitation facilities and water sanitation and hygiene related infrastructure in the government Anganwadis and schools. in two particular districts like Dungarpur, which is a tribal district, and Barmer, which is a district in the desert area. Now, across Rajasthan, we do find that there is a lot of infrastructure, but it is suboptimally used. And this is one of the reasons is because the water availability is low. But there are other reasons also. We also find that the design of the toilet facilities is not really looking into the needs of an adolescent girls who is very much part of the school, or for that matter the the teacher, the lady teacher there, who is again part of the school, or the Anganwadi worker and the helper and the other people who come there, the women who come to the Anganwadis, and the whole thing is co-located within the school compound. So as a result of that, you find that there is a very high absenteeism during the periods of these girls. So just imagine that if there are 200 to 220 school days, out of that, roughly about 45 to 50 days, a girl is absent who is an adolescent girl, just because the sanitation facilities are not really up to the mark or not really responsive enough for her needs. And we'll see how and what are the issues there and what can be done about it. The female literacy rate is 43% on an average in these two particular districts in Rajasthan, as against the national average. And one of the reasons is attributed to the sanitation facilities in some ways. The prevalence of urinary tract infection, I mean, we discussed about that a while ago, is also very high in these areas. And this is something which came out also in the anecdotal accounts of the girls as well as their mothers that we had in the schools. Women and girls have adopted certain behaviors such as urine holding, and this is again leading to the urinary tract infection. And this is happening because the sanitation facility in the school is not good enough. So often either they are going out, going to a friend's place whose home may be nearby, or maybe just going back home and not coming back, and so on. I mean, these are the behaviors which are happening for various reasons and that we see now. There's another thing that we find in case of Rajasthan. This is more prevalent in the desert belt as compared to the other, but the male to female teacher ratio is 3.5:1, and this is also partly due to a supportive infrastructure at the school, which also includes many other factors, but certainly sanitation facilities is one of them. There are other things which are about the lack of trained healthcare workers. There's no access to them, and when the female teachers are not available, the support mechanism that an adolescent girl requires, it also suffers a lot. So there is one thing leading to the other, and so on. One of the important things that we found, and this is true at least in case of the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan as of now in Rajasthan, and this is probably true in many other states, but not all states, that you don't have female engineers or architects who are looking into the infrastructure development. So you would have a gender cell within the education department, but you will not have the civil work cell talking to them. And so they are all working in silos and not even trying to understand the issues that need to be addressed at the ground level for the implementation. Now, there are certain parameters that we need to look at, and I'm very quickly going to take you over them. So, and we'll see some examples. It's a very exhaustive one, but when we are looking at any responsive design, and this is particularly so in the context of what we are going to share with you right now. So one is location, and location also includes many aspects like passive surveillance. I mean, you need a safe, but at the same time, not isolated location. You need a safe route to reach to the sanitation facilities. Often they are dumped in a corner, in a godforsaken place, in a very isolated location, where if you ask these children and even the ladies, like the teachers, they don't want to go there because they don't feel safe about that. You can also not have a safe adjoining area, the neighborhood of that. And very often when these drawings and the plans are made, nobody even surveys what is the best location for these, and they don't even ask the stakeholders on where we are going to locate, is that all right or not, and so on. No such thing is part of the process in terms of planning or implementation at the ground level.
Liquor shop.
So you would have a liquor shop, you would have some kind of an odd place which is predominantly dominated by men. They can overlook into this space and so on. And all these factors do decide the safety and the sense of safety that a girl or a lady teacher would like to have. And the safe envelope design often, and I'll show you with some examples soon, the envelope design of the way the toilets and the urinals are made, it doesn't allow the kind of privacy that one might be seeking, and hence when you don't feel safe, you don't use it. And that's how. So we have created, and this is not true with Rajasthan alone, this is true across in different shades and hues, the fact that we may have made an infrastructure, but it is not used. And that is the suboptimal thing. I mean, we have invested so much into the making of it, but we are not even letting it to be used because of these slips that have happened. The distance from water source, and although we are not going into that domain right now, but it is a fact that if you look at the water sources and the distances of that in relation to even the households or the schools, in many cases, it is the women who are carrying physically on their head the water. They are drawing it from a nearest water source, which could be a hand pump, it could be a well, it could be something else. And of course, schools are better off, but there is an issue here again, which is related to this. So often you will also find that the toilets are located in the low-lying area within the site, and because of that, it would be waterlogged. And since it will be waterlogged, even the sewage system fails, especially during rains. Now, this may not be true so much in case of Barmer, but it is very much true in other areas which do get a good amount of rainfall within Rajasthan, and this is also true elsewhere in the country. Often the adequacy in terms of numbers. So you have, for instance, a certain ratio between the enrollment and the provisioning of infrastructure, and often it is not fully addressed. So at the time of recess or when the children are having midday meal and they have a break, they would like to use more number of provisions, but they are not available. So either you go for staggering of timings or some other way by which it can be addressed, where very often even that is not practiced. Coming down to the architectural detailing, and this is the heart of the matter, where typically it is all designed by the male mindset. And even if there are female architects in the system, they would still be probably driving it from the male mindset, because their education paradigm itself has been driven by that. So often you will not find the anthropometrics, the heights, and the postures and other things which are applicable in case of girls to be studied and used to make the provisioning. The hooks for hanging clothes, for instance, girls are having a different uniform as compared to boys. They might be wearing a dupatta, they might be wearing a salwar and a kurta and so on, and which are loose hanging clothes in some ways, and they need to be secured when a child is, a girl is going and using these facilities. Now, you don't have those provisions because a male doesn't need them probably, and hence they are not even made there. You will have and when I'm saying male driven, it is also not just about the people who are at the planning level. If you look at the execution level, you will have a male mason, you will have a male plumber, you will have a male electrician, you will have a male metal fabricator and a carpenter, a male engineer supervising all of them. So, that entire process, and it is not necessarily an intention in that sense, but certainly it is something that we need to address and change. So in whatever we try to develop, and I'm going to share with you some solutions, we had a team of architects, and it was, Preeti was very much part of it, women architects, women engineers who looked into these issues and also designed it. So the detailing of it, the finer things that matter, and that really changes. And when it is getting executed right now, unfortunately, we don't have women plumbers, women masons and electricians and carpenters on the ground. But it is a hard time for us to make them understand what we are trying to do and why we are doing it. Of course, it takes a while, but they are able to understand it, but it is not so easy. And that is the transition phase that I was talking about. And of course, the clean surfaces for keeping pads, sanitary pads, which are required to be there. Seating posture is a very critical thing, which is not really fully understood by the males. And the design and the detailing of smaller things within a toilet are very much related to this. And these are posture related, how to have, what kind of footrest for foot hygiene. There are a large number of children who do not have footwears, partly because they cannot afford it. And I'm talking about government schools primarily right now. And at the same time, you need to have some kind of a provisioning of footwear for use of the kind of toilets we have. The cleanliness, it is all linked to the posture and things like that, water drainage, and so on. Menstrual hygiene is very important if we really want the participation of the girls and the women in the whole process of education. And hence, it is very important to be responsive in the design detailing for various things, whether it is disposal of pads, the mechanism for that, a mechanism for incinerator that works, then personal grooming equipment, which could even be just a mirror. I mean, we have come across incidents where the girls narrated to us that they were not sure if they have soiled their uniform, and were very shy, and they felt ashamed, and they ran to the toilet, but there was no way that they could figure out if everything was fine when they go out. So you need some basic kind of provisioning, to address these matters,
stains
and to check on the stains and those kind of things. Pee-proof design is something very critical, and often you will find, for the sake of economy or whatever, you would have a shared wall between a boys' urinal toilet block and a girls' urinal toilet block. And the age of adolescence has its own peculiarities and behaviors on the gender aspect also. So you would have, boys who try to make holes in the common walls and so on. Now we need to be very careful about these matters. And this is something which decides the entire course of how the usage of the girls' side of toilet and the urinals is going to take place. So you make an investment and it goes waste simply because you did not think of these small 2-3 details. So here you have a whole range of stuff like placement of opening details, how and where you are locating the opening. It might be aligned to a certain view, which is not something a girl would feel very good about.
Next to a road, maybe.
It could be next to the road, it could be next to the entrance, and so on. You would have opening detail, which is opening right into something where they will not feel comfortable at all. There could be these adjacent features, around that. There could be the door shutter design or its alignment where you have a slit through which it becomes see-through. So, the fabricator did it, somebody executed the job, it was made on the ground and so on, but nobody checked it really, that the alignments were proper. What was the shutter material, and that one could make a hole into it and so on. And, even things like the shutter detail and the jamb, and you could have gaps in between. And anybody who goes inside for the first time would know and would not use it the next time if they find that it is actually not pee-proof. The height of the walls, the way it is designed, we are not talking about making them as cage, but we are talking about something which they feel secure about. And how do we, address those kind of things? The masonry wall details, as I just talked about, and also the latches and the locks and how and where they are located. I mean, these are small details, and often they don't even work. And sometimes nobody is bothered whether they work or not. As long as they can simply be closed, the shutter can be closed but not really locked or latched, it is fine, and that is taken. So you will find what? You will find that often when the girls are going to use the toilet, they are not going alone. They are going in a group of 2, 3, or 4, which means that if one has to go, at least 2 or 3 or 4 have to go. Others are there like security guards, to guard the place, so that the one who is using the urinal or the toilet, and the entire space is underutilized because only one child is using, the others are kind of guarding or waiting for their turn or something like that. There are cultural issues like open drains, and often when you have the menstrual period and if the urinals are having open drains, nobody feels comfortable about the stains that it would have of the blood. And similarly, the sanitary pads need to be available within toilets, because often, as I told you about the ratio of male teachers and the female teachers, there are schools, and we have come across schools where you don't have female teachers, but you have girls, adolescent girls. Now, we don't expect that an adolescent girl is going to go to a male teacher to ask for sanitary pads, even if the government has provided them and they are lying in the principal's room. Now, we need to have a system by which they can easily access them through the toilets. And those design details, so the program which runs these program for free distribution of sanitary pad doesn't look into the design detail of what is being provided in the toilets and so on. The idea of a smoke coming out from the incinerator, puts many girls to shame at a mental level, because they feel that now the boys are going to tease us. And so it's very important to have a kind of a constructive environment where there's a dialogue there's an engagement for people to understand these issues and then, take it forward. So, then, it is very difficult for a girl to go to a male teacher to even talk about the operation and maintenance of the sanitation facilities there. How would a girl actually go there? And it is very, so these are all cultural issues, but they are, I'm sure, in different shades and hues, prevalent in different parts of India. It's not just about Rajasthan. Now, let me show you this drawing that you see here. And I'm first showing you a plan. Now, this is a typical statewide plan. On the left, you have the one for the girls, and the one on the right is for boys. Now, since that ingrained idea of equality, and you don't even then look into, you can call it gender neutral, you could call it whatever, but the fact is it just doesn't work for the girls. And why? And here is the photograph of the same. So on the left is for girls, on the right is for boys. And this is that common wall. And you could have holes in this, the peepholes that I was talking about. Fortunately, in this case, they were not. And now all these urinals are open, as you can see here. And these are these three urinals. Now, you can actually, when you end, and I'm taking this photograph from the entrance of the space, entrance of the school. So if anybody is entering, can actually see right inside that somebody is urinating there. Now, do you think any girl would really go there and use it? No. So they don't use it. And that's what happens to the infrastructure on which whatever investment has already been made. So these three remain underutilized or not utilized at all. And if a girl is going to go and use this, there is going to be one, bodyguard standing outside, that nobody enters this space while this is being used. And if you see it again more carefully, and now this one is for the boys. And anyone can easily climb up or stand here, or if there's a tall one, can actually peep through. Now, this is how we have done it. And this is a standard prototypical design followed in the entire state. Just in case if we were really sensitive and, thought about it, this could have been done differently. And we'll show you how this can be done differently. But Priyadarshini, I'm mindful of the time. You tell me how much time can I take?
Please go on, sir.
Okay. So going forward on this, if you look at this carefully, so this is based on that idea of equality, as I said. So you have everything equal, the urinal type, the design and the detailing, the spaces and everything. And we know that when a woman teacher would go inside, she may be wearing a sari or something and would require some kind of a change. A girl who has a dupatta on her would like to, put it somewhere. But you actually have no such space internally available for any of those things. So it doesn't work. And hence, beyond a point, it doesn't kind of go forward. Now, coming to those parameters that I was talking to you about, and these are live situations. Now, this is a situation in Barmer, in a block called Ramsar. And this is a school which is a primary school. It also has an Anganwadi. It also has a secondary school, all put together in this compact space. So you see a satellite image overlaid with a plan of this whole thing. And we are talking about one particular toilet block. And as you can see, the only entrance is through this slit, and this is that slit. Now this is the entrance. How do we expect our girls to go there through this slit? I don't know who was this mindful person who really located it there and out of what assumptions. And we literally measured this. This is the width through which the girls have to come. If you actually enter into this space, maybe these photographs do not fully capture it, but children have urinated across on that entire stretch, and they have never actually used the real toilet which was meant for this. And you can see this wall, and this is a low wall, and there's some neighbors. This is somebody's home. There's somebody's home, so anybody can peep in here. Now this is what we are giving to our children. I mean, just imagine. So now we need to address this, and we'll see how some of these. I mean, you cannot write off this. You cannot demolish it, and yet we want that children are able to get what they should be getting. So this is one example. There's another example. Here you have two toilets in the rear, two toilet blocks. Now this one is for boys and this one is for girls. Again, while it is, but it's really in the rear of it. And this is very close to the Pakistan border. This is a place called Rohiri, where you see this particular toilet block. We have now transformed it, and very soon, in next 2 to 3 weeks time, there's a totally different image of what you see on this that will be available on the ground. Now this is again an isolated spot, and there is no passive surveillance that can happen in this. And hence, when you talk to the girls, we discovered that they don't use it. They by and large don't feel safe and secure to even go there. Now, in the first one that I was sharing with you, the solution is that we create an access from somewhere else. And we can create an access through one of the windows which can be made as a door. And we can shift the Anganwadi, because this was originally meant for Anganwadis probably. And we discovered that it will also be used by the women who come and take the services of the Anganwadi, the ICDS program. Now, for all that to happen, and for this place to be used, and for that sanitation facility to be available to everyone, we need to make it accessible. We cannot change the boundary, we cannot move the buildings. So what do? You create an access from within, and that's the solution that we are implementing on the ground right now. So, and we have suggested, and the school has kind of agreed to these small little changes. One of them was to bring the Anganwadi here. So right now it is a classroom, but now they will be making it as an Anganwadi room and connect this. And this entire thing has now been detailed out for exclusive use with Anganwadi. So for younger children, smaller children, for the women who come to take the services, and so on. Now, in the other one, which I was just showing you, the advantage of equal design was that we could flip it. So we simply said, why don't we flip it? So now here it has been the flipped version now, where this now becomes the boys and this becomes the girls, and with adequate additional features that we are adding to this, which we'll see in a while. Now, these are the ways in which an existing space can be modified to become and augmented to become much better, and so on. Now, this is an example. These are two. In fact, it's a similar one. The boys block and the girls block. And they had another, because we, after the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and all that came in, so there has been a new surge of making toilets. So we discovered there were another set of toilets which were not functional. So with the consultation from the stakeholders, in which the children were part of it, the teachers were part of it, the Anganwadi people were part of it, we decided that we convert this entire thing into girls' toilet block, this entire thing. So now this is entirely a girls' toilet block, and where we have modified the design so that it suits the requirements of the girls from what is really required by them. And we consulted the teachers, and then it was detailed out, as I said earlier, by women architects. Now, one of the things was that the entrance that you see here has been moved, because this was right next to the main entrance of the school. So we have changed that, because that was not comfortable to them at all. As you can see, this was the water tank with the water at a fixed height, as you can see. Here you have it for the younger children from the Anganwadi and to the older children in the school right up to the adults. And you even have a ramp and steps and the rails for others to come in. There are other small details that all of it I may not be able to share in today's presentation, but now this is the detailing of the example 2 of the desert situation that I was talking about, where we flipped the use of toilets and the urinals from boys and girls. Now in this part, so this is how it is, and now this is how it is evolving right now, including a screen using the plants, the desert plants, to kind of create a visual screen for certain kind of privacy that we are looking for. And again, this was done in consultation with the girls. There was no women teacher in this particular school, so we invited the A&M and others to have this conversation, because we knew that we cannot as males have this conversation. So we invited them and they had a conversation about the possibilities of what can be done with what is already there. Now, another example here is this another school in the desert area where I think the border security force made up a brand new 5-star toilet for them. Now they had, but again the sensibilities for certain things were missing, and so in consultation with them, without any demolition, what is it that can be done the best? So we came up with a solution of simply having curtains, now plastic curtains in this particular case. Now this is going to get implemented, and I think in a month's time we will have the real images of these changes which are implemented on the ground. This is the change that I was talking about a while ago, where the identical boys and girls toilet design is now fully converted into a girls block, and how and what kind of modifications have been done. So as you can see, we have not changed the outer structure of the whole thing. It remains the same. Now this is right next to a road which is running outside this, and hence anybody can just climb up and peep in, and that's why these spaces wouldn't have been used. So we have converted that into now this space has been expanded. This space has been expanded like this. And now from the hygiene perspective, from the Anganwadi perspective, from the menstrual hygiene perspective, all those small little details have been incorporated into these spaces. And this is now, I think in a week's time, this should be ready on ground. If the work is on for past 2.5 months. And so I'll just show you. So I'll show you small little details of what it now has. So what we have now done, they were earlier what you saw. In many of these cases, we are introducing some of these features like a grab bar, and this is meant for ladies. Even the children who fear that they would fall into the seat, the very young children, and so on. This is a small kind of a niche to keep few things that you need to keep sometimes. There's an example of that. These are all splayed, and this is particularly important for the desert area for better light and ventilation, and also to sandproof it during the windstorms that they have. This is a small detail that is important to understand here, the postural detail. And this doesn't work, and this is exactly true across the state where these kind of urinal pans have been provided. The splinters while urinating, touch the body, and it doesn't work. And this again is at a height so that it doesn't work. Now these have been changed. Now we have already changed this to this, because here you get the full height, and it can be used even during the peak hours of recess without really augmenting or adding more infrastructure into it. So it can double up as a toilet, and it remains as a urinal, and so on. And this is important change that is required if we really want to be gender responsive. Here again, the girls complain that they don't like if any blood stains are flowing on an open drain here, and this prevents all of that. Other things like simple provisions at different heights for a younger girl, for an older girl, or an adult to have these hooks provided depending on different situations, whether it can be provided on the door or it can be provided on the wall, and so on. Similarly, from the hygiene perspective, having a hand wash point right inside the toilet. Now that small little cramped space cannot have it. So we expanded, as I showed you a while ago, and also a little space where you can change. And it is elbow operated, as you can see, and all other details. Now, whatever I'm showing you in these visuals were finalized through a consultative process, and then again shared after finalization with the stakeholders, and now currently being implemented on ground. So we will have these models ready very soon, where people can actually go and see. And our plan is to take the state level officials, engineers, and everyone else to these sites and make them interact with everyone there on their own. No guided tour, you interact and you understand what has been done and why it has been done. And it's the children who are going to tell them what has been done and why, because they know the reasoning of everything which has been done. From the menstrual hygiene perspective, small little details of an incinerator. Now we discovered, and this is based on certain studies, that there are these electrical incinerators which are safest and also most durable and workable in all kinds of situations. So through various mechanisms, these incinerators are now kind of being made available, and they are being kind of provided at the suitable locations and at suitable points, and so that they don't have to, nobody has to go out and ask for anything or dump it outside and so on, and the pads etc. can be kept right inside. A provision for a mirror, a full height mirror, so that before going out you can see. For maintenance perspective, various other things, those hooks and everything is part of this process. You can see these hooks and other things also being provided in this. Now, I would like to just conclude. I mean, there are many more details that I can just go on and on. One is that space really matters, and I think it is that subconscious, at a very subconscious level, it operates so many things within us, how we behave, what we are expected to behave like, and what we are supposed to do. And I think that is where it's very important to understand the meaning and the value of space and intervene there. Because in this space, we are manifesting ourselves in so many ways. So the mindset that I was talking about and what Preeti was earlier sharing, it is so much embedded into whatever we are, kind of making. That embodiment of all that is very much there in the detailing of what we do in any particular space. So I think what is very critical and important, and that is what we have learned so far in, how do we become responsive? And as I said, in architectural and in building, we cannot write it off by saying ki isko demolish kar do and break it off and make new. So we need to find that transition from how do we modify, how do we augment it to become more responsive and so on. And that will require engagement. And this will require engagement at multiple levels. If there are multiple departments, they need to be working together. If there are multiple stakeholders, they need to be talking to each other. If there are different kinds of, and these needs are also very diverse. I mean, what I showed you is one part of it. And there's a whole range to it. I mean, you won't find, for instance, those kind of sinks everywhere. You will find some other ways where you have less water, other kinds of taps, other kinds of ways of reducing water consumption and so on. So we need that engagement. That is one. And two is that we I think at different levels in whatever profession we are, we need to raise the voice, of having this engagement. And that's when this kind of a change can actually happen on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was very insightful indeed. So before going into some of the observations and before really summing it up, because we're running short of time, do we have any questions, any feedback, any comments from our members?
Priya, I had a question,
Yes,
if I may.
please, Sekulu, please.
First of all, thank you so much, sir and ma'am. That was such an insightful experience. And I could already see the washrooms being used by little girls at school, so that was so lovely. I just had a question about how, do you think, do you think we can design spaces that can initiate healthy dialogue and conversations? For example, if at all Viraam decides to open a small discussion centers or dialogue centers where we wish people to come and simply have a healthy conversation around patriarchy or anything related to gender, how do you think we should design the space in a way that it encourages the dialogue and also creates a sense of safe space?
Okay, so I'll just give you one small example, and maybe it is not the full answer to your question. Just imagine a bus or an aircraft where you are seating in rows, and imagine a railway train in which you are seating, not in a chair car, but imagine yourself where you have the 6 berths, facing 3 of them facing each other. Now, within few minutes of sitting in that space, a conversation begins. Whereas in an aircraft or a bus, it doesn't happen. And why? And the reason is that the way we are seated in that space, we are facing each other, we are looking at the expression, we are at a slight distance, and yet we understand what is happening to the other. Within few minutes, we start sharing our journeys, our stories, our food, and everything. And this never happens in that sense in a bus or in an aircraft. It's the same set of people. Now, I think we need to be careful here and we observe this, and what is it that we can do to promote that kind of a dialogue. It's not complicated at all. And what I just shared with you, you can do it with simple benches, and these could be movable benches. All you need to do is to configure them and make it so that, people can talk to each other, see the expressions, understand the feelings, and empathize.
That's so beautifully said. In fact, sir, Sekulu's question is also sort of an attempt on our part as a collective to create those safe spaces for dialogues to happen, and especially in the virtual and the digital domain. Doing that, seems to be a task at hand, which we are currently navigating through. So, do we have any more questions? Or any observations, any personal reflections?
I would like to say something, Priya.
Hi, Neha, please go ahead. Yes.
This was actually so insightful that, when we work, we don't realize that these are the inputs that we require while working. And I would like to thank Sir and Ma'am for this, that this is the first time that I've joined this conversation, and I've felt that I've never really read about data for so long as I worked in a small district in MP. I haven't really read about anything. So I think this is I really thank you, Sir and Ma'am, for this. There's one little question that I want to ask to you. As we are on the field and very small district, I realize that there is a lot of constraint that happens around it. This looks like a very ideal situation where we can have the kind of expertise that you provide, the kind of money that flows in, and on the field in actuality, we run in race with time and money, resource, expertise. Believe me, most of the times, the people who are in government would understand that we are often the only woman in the room. And to have this conversation becomes it becomes a very alienated, though a very ideal situation, that I would like my engineer to be a female. I would like my architect to be a female. I would like more females to come on it. So, sir and ma'am, any model that you have done before in a low cost situation where these constraints can be taken over either virtually, where the kind of personal presence is not required. If there are any, please share with us so that we can maybe not replicate, but we can get inspired by it. Thank you.
Okay.
I think, this is going to be a reality for a while, that we may not have female engineers and masons, on field. For example, if we go to Barmer, the terrain is so difficult and so difficult to navigate, and so many issues. Women do not have vehicles, and negotiating that terrain without a personal private vehicle, there's no public transport, so difficult. So You do not have female teachers, you do not have female engineers. It's just not possible. But if the training of the male staff on gender responsiveness, I mean, we will have to pilot it. I think in Rajasthan we did try that, but we really need to sort of mainstream it in some way. We have tried it, but it really needs a lot more work.
We also share and add something. So this is from Gujarat, and the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan there. And it took a lot of persuasion from our side and also from within the system there, that they did appoint, for instance, at all their district levels, one woman architect. And this architect was immediately, the value of having such a person in the system was immediately realized by, I think, everyone. As a result of that, and I'm just right now giving you one data, that they discovered that they were not doing responsive enough design for the girls in most of their schools. So within a span of, I think, 1.5 years, they created something like 106 prototypes for the entire state. And Gujarat is not a big state like any other state. It's a smaller state as compared to many others. And I was really fascinated by the fact, and which something I've never heard of in any government system, that they would immediately go into it. But that's what they did. And I think one of the reasons was that it was very much needed. So the moment it started happening, the demand got generated, and then people realized that this is needed, and then it's kind of picked on. Now this is again happening, this happened within a government system, and this is not outside it. So I think it is important that maybe a new model is created elsewhere, and as Preeti said, that one needs to kind of think it through in different ways. But it is something which is very much doable, maybe in stages, and we will have a transitory phase where it will not happen overnight. But sensitization of who is already there. I mean, we did had a tough time, but it was not impossible, as I just mentioned to you.
And there are other female stakeholders, like there can be female members in SMC school management committee, or an Anganwadi worker. At least she can be trained to do an auditing of whatever infrastructure especially is getting created for women. So some kind of trainings might be needed, and also these can be online also, and training of, I think, more than anything else, of the boys. Because so much of shame is associated with periods, by the girls. And I mean, it is a very important biological fact. It has to be respected. Because of that particular fact, future generations will come, in a nation. And amount of shame, it's unimaginable. An amount of teasing and ridiculing a girl goes through if there is a stain, or if she's started having periods. I mean, it is, when you talk to them, you're really saddened by this fact. So we have a lot of programs for girls, Meena, and I think there are many other such programs which are already targeting the girls, adolescent girls, regarding many issues of periods. But we really need to have something for the boys as well. Really required.
Very true. And I think this is something critical, and it's not just about sensitizing them, the boys, about it. I also understand, and this is something I discovered during the field work, is the fact that it is not that the boys are programmed to be like that. It is also very often that they are not oriented in that. And I think that orientation is also very critical. And this is very much required at different levels. When we are talking about design and detailing of it, it needs to be understood, at least to start with, when you don't have many women architects or engineers as part of the system, for them to understand the intricacies and the relevance of this, and how it connects with the educational outcome of simple thing like access to education. A girl is not coming to the school for those many days. 50 days out of 220 days is a huge number. It's not a small count. So how can you expect her to compete, let us say, when you're looking at exams and all kinds of other things, to have the same level of understanding of certain concepts when she has been missing classes? And one of the reasons is related to this. So I think we need to, parallelly work on multiple things, but one of them is certainly about creating an enabling environment. And what Preeti just said, if in case of a school in Anganwadi, or for that matter, anything that is being done in the social infrastructure development, can there be a social audit which is particularly done by women? And so before the completion certificate is issued, this becomes something as a mandatory element, a kind of a checklist that all those provisions have been made or not made. And if they have not been made, they have to be addressed. Something like that has to be programmed into an existing mechanism, and then gradually it can have more people coming in, joining in, and taking it forward. And as I said, it will not happen overnight. It will go through small little steps and stages.
All right, we have a lot of questions and a lot of people wanting to say something, but thank you, Neha. So Neha, just to introduce her, she's our batchmate. She's currently posted as SDM in Madhya Pradesh. And in fact, this seems to be one of our major concerns, how to have, low-cost models of augmentation and modification, and the best possible way to actually implement this on the ground. So thank you very much, Neha. We have time for another question. So in case one of you wants to go first, because we'll have to wrap up in another 10 minutes. So,
Sir, I had a question. Okay, Diksha, would you want to go?
Yes, any burning questions?
I think it was very good to listen to you, and it was so important that you spoke. It was very good to hear somebody talk like that. I want to say that there are personal experiences, and I'm sure there are lots of personal experiences all gone through that age, and I think there are times where we all have been through all of that, so I think all the more important for all of us to actually find and address all of these things. The most beautiful thing that I loved about the conversation, which I want to say, is that you said that the most important thing that is engagement. Is the important engaging voice. And I think both of these things are so important. I work with an organization right now where we are all in about social work and all of those things, but we do not have the required facilities for even the female faculty to, use washrooms. And then when we're talking about productivity, I think there's a lot of anxiety. There's so much that comes in, emotional turmoil before even I am on my period. So I think there are so many things that go unsaid or unheard, and it is so important that we start engaging and also we start raising our voice against what's happening. So thank you so much for all of that. What I wanted to ask was, I think there was a point where you said that we as men, people don't, like the girls weren't very fine with talking to you all. So do you think that when we are having such conversations, how much of the teams that we are actually building in, like let's say if I'm trying to bring a change in the organization that I am a part of, how much female representation is important at all levels, and also is it possible? And if it is not, then how does one negotiate? Like you said that we got in other people, but do they also, feel with the same vision or are in the same, like do they really think like you and all of those things? How do you negotiate in those cases?
Well, it's a difficult task to tell you. I mean, it's not easy at all, and it will take time, as I said. But I think one needs to work parallelly. But parallelly, when I'm saying at different levels, because you cannot say that I'll start from here and then I will reach there, because there is a lot of. There are people who are also changing. There's a lot of transfers. You train someone and then somebody else at a different level changes. So how do you deal with that in a government system? And I think it is very important that there is a recurrence of this kind of an orientation. And this is also important that one is engaging at different levels. And the kind of language that is being used when we are engaging with them, it has to be one where they are able to see it at a personal level. Otherwise, it becomes something which they cannot relate to. So there has to be example, there has to be something that is doable, something that they can relate to at their own level, and how their own stake is critically linked there. I do remember some workshops where, the resource persons, when they were talking to the male engineers, they were talking about their daughters. So immediately the connection with what is happening in the school changed for them. And suddenly they would started looking at it. And, The similar thing we do when we are talking to the masons. We said that तुम्हारी एक बिटिया होती और यहाँ पर आएगी तो वो जाएगी इसके अंदर उसको यूज करेगी क्या? Do you think ये metal fabricator जो door बना रहा है, will they actually use it? Because this is having those kind of problems. So suddenly they become mindful about it. And I think it is very important how we engage them and what language we use to engage them at these parallel levels.
So that personalization of pain somewhere is very, very much needed, unless till then, it is someone else's problem. There has to be personalization. And I think that women in leadership positions, they can really, social changes do take a lot of time, but I think leadership position, if there is one strong woman, she can bring in a lot of change, even if she's all alone.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't think we'll take any more questions now. Whatever questions we do have, we'll write it all down and we'll get connected with you again very soon. In fact, we'll take in some of our questions from our members later on, and I'll write you a nice long mail.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks a lot.
It was a pleasure to talk to all of you.
Yeah.
Certainly. Thank you so much.
Katyayani, would you like to? Go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir and ma'am. I think, we get a lot of thoughts to ponder upon, because I guess, as we talked about it right at the start, a lot of such design interventions are actually thought out processes, but such, overlooks in design are probably not, very conscious overlooks, but they are something as a part of how we normalize things. So thank you so much. As Priya said, we'll be writing you a long mail and probably a series of mails, because we'll be having a lot of questions. And thank you so much for giving your time to us and for a wonderful evening.
I leave with two thoughts. One is that when you spoke about equality, barabari, it just seems that being more gender sensitive and maybe gender specificity is the way forward for equality. In fact, that is how barabari will essentially come. The more sensitive and attentive we are to gender. Also, the fact that space and technology are not essentially neutral spaces, much as we would like to think it to be. But there is power inbuilt. There are biases that are imprinted on them. So being more observant is something that I also take from today's talk. And of course, spaces can be augmented. And rather than going through an entire overhaul of a space, certain very small, augmentations, certain very imperceptible modifications can create a world of change. So we are taking a lot with us, and hope to have you again very soon amidst us.